Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for our Many Rivers online presentation for our 8th annual evaluation report. My name's John Byrne and I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Many Rivers. And I can see that we have many viewers from across this great country today and also representatives from government, corporate and philanthropy. So I just wanted to say welcome and thank you to everyone. Especially for accepting yet another Zoom meeting invitation. I think we've all had a lot of those over the last 8 months or so. Today I'm also joined by Matt Wright. Matt is a partner at Deloitte Access Economics and he is the leader of the Deloitte team that helps us with our evaluation. And I wanted to welcome Matt and thank him for co-presenting this event with me this afternoon, or this morning, in fact, if you're in Western Australia. And to also thank him and his team for the work on this year's evaluation. Normally at this time of the year, we would have the wonderful opportunity of meeting each other face to face at our annual update event series. Unfortunately, one of my personal highlights for the year isn't available to us this year because of COVID. So we really do appreciate the fact that you've made yourself available today to participate in this webinar. Before I go any further, I do want us to pause and to acknowledge our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters across this great land. And in doing so, I just wanted to say that Many Rivers acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the custodians and of the traditional land and waters of Australia. And we acknowledge and pay respect to them and to their cultures and to their elders past and present. And I especially wanted to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, which is the traditional land on where Many Rivers head office is here in Sydney, and from where I am joining you today. Look, over the next hour, our plan is to update you on the year that has been Many Rivers. I think one of the things I've observed over the years that everyone has quite an amazing story to share, and so it's a privilege to be able to share with you some of our story today. And then Matt will also present highlights from this year's evaluation for everyone to hear. There are a couple little technical things we wanted to cover with you. You'll see on your Zoom link the opportunity to ask questions. So please make sure that you do that in the chat area. We have James Clampett, our Head of Business Development, monitoring those questions. And James will help facilitate a Q&A at the end of our presentations today, but he will also kindly interrupt us during the presentations if there's questions that he feels are helpful for people to have answered as we go. Everyone's automatically muted in this process, so if you really want to say something or ask a question, using the chat is the best way of doing that. So that's sort of a few things on the technical side. So what I thought I might do is just give you a quick update from an organisational perspective on what's been going on for Many Rivers before I hand over to Matt to present the evaluation report. I'll just share my screen here. Just a reminder about our purpose initially, just that Many Rivers really focuses on this idea of supporting individuals and communities experiencing individual and structural disadvantage. And we do that through enterprise and economic participation. And we have a particular focus on supporting Indigenous Australians. And I often talk to people about that. Our product is not our purpose. Our purpose is about supporting those experiencing disadvantage. The reason why we choose enterprise and economic participation is our view is that unless you can participate in the real economy in a sustainable way through employment or business, you can't actually move out of a position of disadvantage. And at its highest level, we would say that economic participation is fundamental to self-determination. Just a reminder about where Many Rivers works. in this map of Australia here, just firstly, we have different colours. The darker the colour actually is a reflection of the degree of remoteness in Australia. And then the lighter the colour shows you where there's more urban and regional areas. And you can see that Many Rivers now has the opportunity to have 39 micro-enterprise development managers operating around the country, and also 9 community economic development managers. We often joke in Many Rivers, if you'd like to know what the weather is in Australia, then give Many Rivers a call and we'd probably be able to tell you. So it's a great privilege to be able to work with a team of people literally sprinkled around this country. This is a slide for summarising our strategy. I think most people know us for our long involvement in the provision of micro-enterprise development support, and increasingly know us through our community-based economic development work. They are the core, I guess, service offerings that Many Rivers provides, but we also continue to develop our small business and schools initiative, which is really an initiative focused on supporting people with understanding about business and financial knowledge as a way of thinking about business for the future. And we also continue to develop our pilot concept around marketplace, and including, as part of that, inclusive procurement, where we would like to see the opportunity to support revenue flow into regional and remote communities. And one of the I guess, opportunities that Many Rivers sees because of our great distribution network and a lot of the work we do in regional remote Australia is our ability to bring visibility of economic opportunity into remote communities, as well as visibility of those communities into the mainstream economies. And that's an area that we continue to want to develop as part of our work as well. In terms of just summarising what micro-enterprise development means for us, it really falls into these 3 components. One is services, followed by the product offering that we give, and then supported by the relationship that we have with our clients. And you can see the different elements of service, products and relationships there. But I would say that's something that Many Rivers works hard to develop and maintain. It's very central to the DNA and the purpose of our organisation is the depth of relationships that we build with our clients. To give you an idea about how we think about journeying with clients, obviously people approach us with a business idea. We start to meet with them and do some planning, and hopefully they get started. But that's not the end of our relationship with our clients. We want to then continue to support them as they grow and then grow into sustainable businesses. To give you an idea of what that looks like for Many Rivers today, you can see there that we're currently working with over 2,000 businesses, of which 806 of those are getting ready for business and 1,262 are operating. And I know a number of people on this webinar will be interested to know that 800 of those businesses are run by Indigenous people. I've had lots of questions over the last 8 months about what has COVID-19 meant for Many Rivers and our clients and our communities. And so this chart just gives you an understanding of what's happened since the end of February. Like everyone, it was a very dramatic time for Many Rivers supported businesses. We had 1,250 operating businesses at the start of COVID-19. And that quickly came to be that 46% of those businesses were either ceased permanently or ceased temporarily. That's 46%. So almost half of our businesses were very significantly impacted. But what you can see from this chart is that there's been a really strong resilience and a really strong turnaround and rebuild of those businesses. And as recently as Monday morning, that 46% of businesses had reduced to 17%. And the other area that we've noticed in our business is that the number of people that are interested in starting business has returned to levels that are above what they were pre-COVID, which has been a really interesting observation of ours. As people think about business being a future opportunity, and I think we can definitely see that there's what we'd say people who would normally come to Many Rivers for our support, but we are seeing different types of people coming to Many Rivers for the first time as well. And I'm sure in the Q&A process, people will be interested to explore that further. The other part of our business that is becoming increasingly important is our community economic development work. So our microenterprise development work very much focuses on working with individual business owners. They typically employ themselves and a couple of other people. But we've also, over the last 5 years, been developing our community economic development program. And this specifically works with Indigenous corporations around the country, primarily in regional and remote and very remote locations. And again, COVID has been an interesting story. Back in March, at the start of COVID-19, we were working with 17 Indigenous community groups around the country, and that has now grown to 30 since March. So almost doubling the number of Indigenous communities that have been engaged in economic activity and interest in that. And one of the particularly exciting parts of that work is those leaders in those corporations represent over 5,800 Indigenous members. So these are organisations that are building out their economic activity. We obviously were able to provide support during COVID-19 with a lot of corporations thinking about their governance and financial management and their economic sustainability of the corporation. And even though some of their business activities have had to be necessarily slowed down, they've still been very, very busy organisations. Another area that's been really exciting for Many Rivers this year has been our ability to develop some new resources. And these are all open to those who are interested. You can see the hyperlink there to the manyrivers.org.au website under the resources tab. And through our partnership with Youth Business International and recently with google.org, which is the charitable arm of Google, they were very keen to see resources developed to support existing businesses during COVID-19. So through this work, we've been able to put a whole suite of content together that is very, very helpful for clients who are thinking about business and also working through the COVID experience. The Many Rivers approach has not been to summarise the internet. So what we have tried to do is think about specifically what our clients have typically been facing in their businesses and provide some really practical tips to help them think about how to improve their business. So that might be something that the viewers of the webinar might be interested in, and I just really encourage you to have an explore of the resources, and we'd love to get your feedback on that as well. And of course, client stories, and Matt will reference these, I'm sure, to some extent in his presentation. But again, increasingly we're recording people's stories. Our other clients really value hearing from other clients' experiences and learning from them. And it's a real privilege to be able to share some of those client stories online as well. So there's now over 70 client stories that are available for you to have a look at. So look, that gives you a quick update on what's been going on for Many Rivers. What I'm going to do now is stop sharing my presentation and hand over to Matt, who will talk us through this year's evaluation. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, John. I will just get my presentation up. Okay. Can you hear me okay, John?
Yep, perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, good afternoon or good morning. Thank you for joining us from wherever you might be in the country. I too would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land lands on which we each find ourselves today. I'm on Wurundjeri country, a beautiful day here in northeast Melbourne, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I would also like to thank Many Rivers for partnering with Deloitte Access Economics now for 8 years, which, if you've heard me present before, is the longest running assignment that we have had as an organisation. And with that comes great opportunity to get very deep into some really important economic and social issues and some very strong data that helps us form robust points of view around the issues that are being faced around economic and social development across the country, and productive ways to address those. I also need to thank my team who have prepared the work that I'm presenting today. I'm presenting on their behalf. So to Paula and Grayson and Yen and Mark, thank you very much for the good work that you've done, that I will give a quick snapshot of today. And naturally, I would encourage everyone to take the time to engage with the full report, which will be available online. It's a very rich document, and it's a tough job each year to pick a small number of slides that do justice to Many Rivers and what we can learn from their journey and their clients' journeys. I think we were unsure what we were going to observe this year with the effect of COVID. John has given a nice overview of how that was quite stark when it first hit, but has actually bounced back probably more than we were anticipating. There's obviously more to be observed with various support policies still in place across the country. So we'll all watch with anticipation, but the impact on the numbers was, in our evaluation reporting, was not as significant as we thought, and that's something that Many Rivers, I'm sure, has worked very hard to achieve and would be very proud of, as should their clients be very proud of that recovery. And the only other thing I would say before I get started is that, as usual, there's a slight difference in the timeframes of some of my numbers and some of John's. John's are the most contemporary. The numbers in the evaluation are the year to date or taken as at June 2020. So just forgive if there's a slight disparity in some of the numbers that John presented and some of the ones that I will present in a moment. Okay, well, let's get into it. So firstly, I'll talk about the Microenterprise Development Program. And we'll start with a quick look at one aspect of the clients who participate in the Microenterprise Development Program's circumstances. The most important characteristic to present on is the financial disadvantage that those clients experience. This has become an increasing focus for Many Rivers over time. And that's demonstrated in this chart on the left here. So what that is showing is the level of dependence on welfare and the level of access to finance of clients over time. And you can see the light green and dark green bars growing, which is representing clients enrolling with Many Rivers having greater issues around financial disadvantage over time. In fact, it's now at the point where 97% of clients are experiencing financial disadvantage, either in terms of dependence on welfare or access to finance, compared to 94% last year and lower numbers in the years before. So Many Rivers has been very effective in targeting that particular cohort. If you look down the bottom right, you can see the relative distributions of individuals across different degrees of dependence on welfare and access to finance, and you can see that the light green are the more acute circumstances, and the light blue where it's less of an issue. So when it comes to the clients' demographics, are a couple of aspects of that being gender and age. It's interesting, clients are almost equally likely to be female or male. So 49% of clients are female, 51% are male. They are on average 45 years old. But what's always been interesting is the spread of ages, and you can see those in the blue and green charts at the top right and bottom left of your screen. That's been quite consistent over time from what I recall also. So we have people as young as 18 and people as old as 80 years of age, and that spread is, it's quite a smooth distribution in a way. So it's always been interesting for us to see. Certainly no signs of age discrimination in who Many Rivers is engaging with, and I'm sure the client stories do good justice to that as well. So beyond the details of the clients work with Many Rivers to establish or grow businesses. And in financial year 20, we observed 358 businesses supported to commence or expand their operation with Many Rivers. That is, if you look at that number 358, which is the far right-hand bar in that chart, as compared to the bar just to the left of it for financial year 19. Financial year 19, that number was 376. So those two numbers are comparable, which would be perhaps a surprising result given the economic circumstances that the country has found itself in this year just gone. So that was a pleasing result for Many Rivers, I'm sure, and it means that the total number of supported businesses over Many Rivers operations over time, it has now reached 2,390 businesses. When we took the measure, there was 1,100 of those businesses that were operating. John's just given an update, a number slightly larger than that at this stage, which is a signal of recovery and further growth. And when we had looked at it at that point in June, 1 in 5 businesses had indicated they'd been negatively affected by COVID-19. The other categories there, you can see are businesses who have ceased, and whether they've ceased well or poorly. There's a really nice zoom in on all of that detail in the full report, and it would be worth having a look at that. I wouldn't be able to do it full justice in the time that we have together today. So the other really striking feature of the businesses that Many Rivers helps create is their sustainability, so the period of time over which they continue to operate. Each year we have found that despite the circumstances that business owners who Many Rivers support face, the various challenges that they face personally and economically, the lifespan of these businesses compares favourably to the national average. So it's often the case that Many Rivers supported businesses meet or exceed the national average despite the circumstances that they are facing. So that's captured there in the top left, where the national average is in light blue, and Many Rivers supported businesses are there in the green columns. And you can see the distinction there between Indigenous owned businesses and non-Indigenous owned businesses. The chart on the right hand side lets us have a look at the survival rate. So businesses still operating as a share of all businesses who commenced over time. So we can't look at a national average after 3 years, but Many Rivers data is strong enough that we can follow that out over time. You can see that the sample size is getting a little low by the time we get to year 7. So we treat that with a little bit of caution, but at this stage we observe that 20% of Many Rivers supported businesses are still operating 7 years after operation, and it'll be interesting to see if that starts to flatten out a little bit over time, which would probably be our expectation. So those businesses employ people, and what we're looking at here is just a snapshot of how many people those Many Rivers supported businesses employed at June 2020. So it doesn't sum up the employment over time. But in any case, what we can observe is 2,600 people employed in Many Rivers supported businesses at June 2020, of which about 900 were Indigenous Australians, and almost half of the 2,600 were the owners of the businesses working in those businesses. So you can see that on average, each business has a little over one employee, but that does vary quite a bit, because you'll see in a second the different sized businesses that Many Rivers is supporting. That is, so at 2,600 odd, that is quite a bit up on what was achieved last year, which was around 2,350. One thing that strikes us here is the proportion of business owners who are female. So that's 51% in the case of Many Rivers supported businesses, and that compares to the national average of 35%. So Many Rivers supported businesses much more likely to be owned by a female owner. And similarly, on the employees side of things, 49% of employees in Many Rivers supported businesses are female, compared to a national average of 47%. Those businesses, in addition to creating employment, are also obviously generating revenue. Just over half of the businesses generated annual sales revenue of more than $15,000. When you sum that up across all of the businesses for the year, the annual turnover figure for financial year 20 is about $46 million, which is fairly comparable to last year's result. It's interesting to watch the number of businesses in the upper end of the distribution, which on this chart would be as you work your way down the page. So you can see as businesses get older, which is businesses in the darker green, you can see them more distributed across the higher turnover categories. And you can see that that large number of businesses who are generating up to $15,000 per annum are substantially young businesses, less than 2 years of operation. So there's the interesting threshold to watch for policymakers, perhaps, is that 17% of businesses meet the threshold for GST registration. So we should expect that they're paying GST. And there are some other interesting results in there, like some quite large businesses, some generating over $1 million of turnover in the year, and a good proportion of those businesses have been supported by Many Rivers for a number of years, and they are largely Indigenous businesses as well, which is worth noting. So those clients who are operating those businesses and experiencing that employment and turnover are inevitably improving their personal financial circumstances. And if you've seen these charts over time, there's a range of measures that we look at, but one in particular to focus in on is welfare dependence. The light green category represents those who experience little to no welfare dependence, and the grey category represents those who experience complete welfare dependence. And as you start at the top of the page, that is the result when they first make contact with Many Rivers. So 45% of clients are experiencing little to no welfare dependence, and the other 55% experiencing substantial or complete dependence on welfare. It's quite interesting to observe how that dependence on welfare changes over the number of years that client works with Many Rivers and operates their business. So that's what's happening as you work your way down the page, 5 years of operation of the business, and you can see that at that point in time, those with little to no welfare dependence has grown from that initial result of 45% to a result of 80%, which is significant. And it's also interesting to note that that positive effect happens quite quickly. So it happens within a year of operating a business typically. And it sort of reminds us of the persistence of some of the challenges that some clients will face in terms of that sort of rate of improvement slowing a little bit after that point. John foreshadowed client stories. We have been able to systematically explore and analyse these over time. So they are unfiltered, open text responses to interviews that are held between the Microenterprise Development Manager and the person that they support, or others within the organisation. There's a large number of those now online, but also in the database that Many Rivers holds. When we've done some systematic analysis over those, there's 3 themes that have emerged, and those are the themes of aspiration, trust, and confidence. And what becomes quite clear is that it's those 3 things that are supported by Many Rivers and the Microenterprise Development Managers. The creation of those attributes and circumstances are in large part what's driving the success of individuals, including their perceptions of their success. So that's quite logical when you think about it, and it's pleasing to see that proven in the evidence as well. So that's a really brief snapshot of the Microenterprise Development Program. There's so much more richness to see in the report proper around that. But the other key feature of the report is the community economic development work, which is growing in prominence quite quickly, as this next slide demonstrates. So when we measured at June 2020, Many Rivers was working with 25 communities across Australia. It's now a bit larger, as John shared before. Those 25 communities represent 3,800 participating community members. There are 8 community economic development managers who are supporting those relationships. And when we did our snapshot, there were 35 additional communities under active consideration for further support. So we should expect to see these numbers growing, as you can see in the chart, quite substantially over time. And the flow on of that is the improved financial and economic circumstances of those communities and those who benefit from those circumstances. So what we have observed is, for those communities supported over multiple years, we can see increases in employment and also typically increases in revenue and profit and assets. And those measures are reported at the bottom of the page there. So that the starting point measure, the baseline measures in grey in the rows, and then the improved measure as it's currently measured at June 2020 in the coloured rows below. It's also quite important to note how that's achieved, and there's some important qualitative information and detail in the report proper, but in quite simple terms, it's achieved through quite a long partnership with those communities over 5 years on balance. And the chart, or the figure 1 here, I should say, illustrates that it starts with quite a focus on foundations, and the dimensions of that are explained in that report, but does progress towards economic focus as those foundations are in place. So similar lengths of time involved in getting from a baseline to a strong and sustainable outcome between the two microenterprise development and community economic development focus points for many rivers. This is my last slide. It's just a summary of what I've taken you through, and a couple of other things that are worth looking into. You can see the conclusion is, of course, that Many Rivers is making an impact. It's doing that by supporting clients and communities to move out of structural disadvantage, and that involves a journey, and a journey of growing self-belief and accountability and networks and business acumen, all the things that you would imagine. And these key stats, this dashboard, is available in the report, and there's a version of it online, and you can see again the playback of who the clients are, the journey that they've gone on with Many Rivers over time, the outcomes that they're achieving, and indeed the outcomes that the communities that Many Rivers is supporting are achieving. But with that, I think I'll stop there, and John, I'll pass back to you and be pleased to answer any questions that might come through to us via the chat.
Great, thanks very much, Matt. That was really helpful. I'm sure everyone would have appreciated hearing Matt speak about the report, and it's probably raised a number of questions or comments that people might make or would like to make. James, as I mentioned before, is our head of business development. James has been moderating the conversation as we go along. So James, I just might hand to you to see if there's some comments or questions that people would like to make or have questions answered.
Yeah, thanks, John. Shanali Vanderspeck asks, she says hello, first of all.
Hi, Shanali. Nice to see, or nice to know that you're joining us.
And she also asks, how did JobSeeker affect the motivation and drive of individuals to stay in business or want to get out of the welfare system?
Sure. I mean, I think there's no doubt that JobKeeper and JobSeeker were key inputs to economic stimulus, and our clients definitely experienced that too. I think and you'll see this in the report, and Matt, you might like to add more to it, but about half of our clients' businesses were able to access either JobKeeper or JobSeeker through the process. But there was also, I guess, during those early COVID experiences, a slowdown in interest in terms of starting new business. I think it's not surprising that individuals and communities were significantly impacted by what was going on and weren't sure what to do. And so the government stimulus definitely supported through that process. But not surprisingly, again, as people realise that stimulus opportunities are starting to be wound back, as they appropriately should, and also they need to take increased responsibility for looking after themselves and their families and communities, then economic activity and interest in businesses come back on as well. And I think the best representation of that is probably our COVID-19 chart that I showed earlier in our presentation, where you can really see how businesses have restarted and recommenced. And as I mentioned before, the number of people interested in business for us in terms of coming to us in the first place has actually gone back beyond what it was before COVID, which is exciting and very interesting. Partly that's, I think, because we're increasingly becoming known as an organisation that can support you to start a business, and people can find us more online now than perhaps they could in the past, and I think that's encouraging it. So, as well as the fact that people are going, things have changed for me now, and maybe I need to take a different path. But Matt, from your perspective, anything else you wanted to add on that point?
No, look, you're right, John. There's some good further detail around JobKeeper and JobSeeker specifically in the evaluation report in terms of the degree to which businesses were accessing it and relying on it. And I think the other interesting charts to look at in the report are, there's some charts around the business cease rate over time. And I suppose it's interesting to see that in 2020, the business cease rate hasn't really spiked in the way that you might think it would, and it's not the highest point that Many Rivers has experienced in its history. So to me, I would start to infer from that the incentive hasn't dramatically changed for individuals, but I guess we've still got a little bit of water to pass under the bridge in terms of policy change there and what that might mean, which we should, expect to be able to report back on this time next year with more confidence.
John, Ashna Tanea asks, hello, I'm curious as to whether you've done any counterfactual analysis of what the 2020 stats would look like if COVID-19 hadn't happened.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think, and this is, I guess it's a little bit hypothesis based, isn't it now? Because like what happened. But I believe the reason why our business commencements level was commensurate with prior years, or the prior year, was actually we were on a run rate trajectory to be probably 100 business commencements above what we ended up being able to achieve. So I think for me, we probably saw about a 25% impact of people starting business, and particularly early on. And I really, do need to compliment the Many Rivers team, both the Microenterprise Development team and the Community Economic Development team. I know that everybody's had their COVID story, and I always say that Many Rivers is a busy organisation, but I don't believe our team has ever worked more consistently and with diligence than we have this year. We were cycling through, engaging with all of those client businesses about every 3 weeks. We were meeting consistently as an organisation to talk about opportunities to support. The team were getting together and sharing ideas of what was working in one part of the country, potentially that could work in another part of the country. So the consequence of that is actually our business sustainability rate is actually currently trending higher than it normally would, which is a really interesting statistic. So we'll see, as Matt said, what the washout will be around business survival rates. But at the moment, our sustainability of businesses is going up, not down. So, and that's a function of the fact that businesses are recommencing. And so it's one of the things Matt and I have talked about is doing a 12-month post-COVID review of Many Rivers supported businesses to be able to understand that more. But yeah, I would say that would be the two key points I'd make. We've probably lost about 20% of business commencements through the process, and our sustainability rates, whilst hit very hard early on, have come back and actually look quite strong right now. Matt, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
No, I think it's, as an economist, it's always pleasing to hear someone use the word counterfactual. But no, look, I think we will have a better sense of that once there's enough time has passed since the commencement of this effort and the various public responses have washed through, and indeed we can compare Many Rivers to some national averages as those get published, but that still remains to be seen. And I think it just reminded me, John, that the national average business survival rate that I had up on the screen before was before the impact of COVID, and so if that number goes down, then Many Rivers' performance would be quite a margin, I suppose, above the national average. So that'll be worth watching and returning to the event next year to see how that goes.
Yeah, thank you.
John, Stuart Hatton asked the question,
Hi, Stuart.
and I know that Matty Ralph, who's on the call as well, will be interested in the answer to this.
Hi, Matt.
Will you be including Marketplace in the evaluation report in the future?
We would love to be able to include Marketplace in the report. The way that we see it being included is in a number of areas, but the one that I think's most material is the revenue growth opportunity that's available for small businesses. The idea of marketplace, for those that aren't so familiar with it, is that a number of different types of organisations, like corporates, like government, are interested in local sourcing, including sourcing from Indigenous business owners. And one of the areas I think that Many Rivers has a really strong opportunity to support those businesses as well as those corporates is helping them think about redirecting their procurement budgets towards local businesses. And that will achieve a number of objectives, but I think one of the most important ones for a for-profit is a cost savings, as they are able to source local content. I think we've probably all heard the story about some of the resource sector needing to fly dirty laundering out of the Pilbara down to Perth to get washed and sent back. There's no way that that can be economically efficient or price efficient to a corporate compared to a local laundromat service. So we think it's very important because it will stimulate the revenue flow into our core client group, both at an individual business owner level and at a community level. And it will also stimulate new business growth as well, because you're essentially providing a revenue flow into business opportunities. So I think that's how it will be reflected in the valuation. We have done a lot of really new thinking around how to make that work, and we're keen to get started on it.
John, Arush Kumaraje asks, small businesses have been put in the forefront of post-pandemic economic recovery globally, and especially here in Australia, with state and federal government initiatives and tax breaks being offered over the coming year. Are you seeing an increased confidence level in people getting into business at grassroots MED level?
Yeah, there's no doubt that interest is increasing. I had the chance to spend some time actually yesterday evening with the CEO of Youth Business International. And so it was really interesting to share stories globally around the resilience and the growth of small business. One thing in particular we talked about was the use of technology as a way of supporting clients in their business journey. And that's certainly been the Many Rivers experience as well. I don't think that will ever replace the role of face-to-face engagement in business and in supporting a business journey. But we absolutely see that augmenting face-to-face with virtual engagement is a huge opportunity to build scale into what we do. And I think that people are becoming much more familiar with using technology as a way of engaging, which again will create extra interest. I think on the other side, around the demand side of interest in business, I think a large number of people have probably been employed in large employees in the past, and it'll be very interesting to see, but I wouldn't be surprised if the slower recovery level will actually be in larger businesses. And it's actually the micro and small business area that actually will recover more quickly. And that's generally a function of the adaptability and resilience of the small business owner to seek opportunity, make decisions and go. So I definitely agree with government policy around a small business-led recovery.
John, Gillian McMillan asks, how do Many Rivers clients connect with corporate opportunities where appropriate and relevant to share understanding of capability and work together on building capacity?
Look, that's a really great question. I think for us, and we sort of covered a little bit already about our conversation around marketplace, there's probably a couple of challenges that are really significant. One is around visibility and the other is around engagement. The first is really that often corporates can't see a small business, and so therefore, even if you wanted to source locally, it's hard for you to know where to see those businesses. And typically, small businesses engage around dialogue and not documents. And so I think that's another challenge for corporates is how do you actually help a person understand what you need without essentially requiring them to read 200 pages to respond to a tender. And so I think our thought is that we want more dialogue-based procurement to come into the process.
John, a question for you and Matt. What is the outcome or data point that continues to wow you each year?
I should ask you that question, James. Matt, do you want to have a go on that one, or do you want me to?
I can go first, John. I think it's hard to, there's a lot of data points. It's hard to pick one that's most worth reiterating. I think the business survival rate is worth paying close attention to. I think that's been quite positive for a long time, and positive with some pretty strong headwinds. So that one's always been one of our favourites to pay close attention to. And I think in the pardon me, in the more recent period, and noticing that business owners are more likely to be female rather than male, and how that corresponds with the success has been an important story that the analysis has revealed and hadn't been detected earlier on. And maybe, yeah, there's also some interesting stats in the report about different cohort groups performing better than one another on certain measures, and those are worth having a look at, because I do think there's a couple of possible myths busted by a few of those results. But I'll let the readers be curious about that comment and go and have a look for themselves.
Thanks, Matt. Look, yeah, from my perspective, it's always really hard just to pick one number. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll say two, but I'll say one. And I think for me, one of the key numbers is the fact that in the last 5 years, there's been over $200 million of revenue earned by the microenterprise businesses. I think that is a really significant number. And I think that will continue to grow, but it's when micro businesses add together, then the impact can be very significant. And when you overlay that against the need and the demand, I think that says there's massive potential.
Thanks, John. How is Many Rivers using the data to improve your operations? And if you could probably give an ME, Microenterprise Development answer, and a CED development answer.
Sure. Well, that's actually always an interesting part of the evaluation journey for us, is to understand what the evaluation tells us about how we go about doing our journey with clients. And people often ask me, well, why do you do evaluation? And I know everybody on this webinar is obviously interested about what's going on and what we're doing. But I always say that our first foundation for evaluation is for ourselves to understand how we are working with our clients and our communities. And as part of that process, we look at things, we've learned things like how important record keeping is to business sustainability, and so we've created a product in response to that. We've understood different trends around likelihood of loan repayment and business sustainability, so we've been able to change the way we make decisions about lending people. We've been able to look at the way that we, our cost to serve in terms of the way we spend our time. We can have really strong information now about how our team work with clients and how much that costs and how to be more efficient around that. So therefore we start to recreate ideas around not just driving into long distances, remote areas, which we have to do quite a lot, but how do we augment that with virtual-based engagement and support as well. So as part of the process that we go through each year with Matt and the team, we sit down at the end of evaluation and basically say, what did we learn and how do we want to think about changing the way we work in the future? For CED, for Community Economic Development, I think the key for me there has been to essentially replicate the evaluation framework in the context of community work, and it's been very transportable and repeatable. And so what we've been able to do is take the learning framework of MED over 8 years and start to apply that into the CED framework. And I think the other part that's really important about evaluation in the CED work is how you see value extending over time. So early on, you do get economic benefits as you start to build strong foundations, and then business activity takes off from that. And Matt's talked a little bit about that. I guess one difference between CED and MED is the role that asset creation in the community corporation plays is much stronger than in the MED business. So often the micro business assets are consumed quite quickly for business and personal use, but within the community context, asset creation and growth over time becomes increasingly important.
John, this is the last question for you and Matt. You've been doing evaluation now for 8 years.
Yep.
Where does evaluation go to from here, and what do you see it contributing to Many Rivers over the next few years? Yeah,
sure. I can definitely answer that. Matt, you've probably got an economist answer to it as well, and I know that's something we talk about. I might get Matt to answer first, but I guess just to frame it is that we committed to a 10-year evaluation journey at the start, and that was, I think, a very important decision that our board took. And so being at eight years, what does the next 2 years look like? So Matt, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, happy to, John. There's 3 things that stakeholders can expect over the next couple of years. So what we've been able to do by getting access to this quite rich data over many years is, establish the effectiveness of Many Rivers. I think Deloitte Access Economics feels satisfied with that, has done for a number of years now, and are into a few other sort of extensions of that. The first extension is the concept of efficiency. So our view is that efficiency is a function of effectiveness. So now that we've established effectiveness, we can work out just how efficiently is Many Rivers able to achieve that. And we have started to illustrate that in the last couple of reports, and there's much more coming on that in the next year or two. The other great thing that we've been able to do is, and John, I think you foreshadowed it just a moment ago, we've been able to explain that effectiveness and that efficiency in quite quantitative terms. So we can actually say, how does this feature of a client's circumstances, or this length of time with a client, or this particular product, how much does that actually improve the likelihood of them being successful across the range of measures that Many Rivers is interested in? So business sustainability, or likelihood of reduced welfare dependence. It's really rare to be able to do that sort of analysis confidently over time. And the other thing that can come with many years of data and evaluation is you can sum it all up and you can see what was it worth over 10 years. So it's probably likely that when we get to the 10-year mark, we could look at things like various cost-benefit ratios and the return on investment to the various stakeholders who have invested in Many Rivers over that period of time. And yeah, I think we would expect to see quite a healthy return on investment, but we'll save that for when we do that analysis in a year or two's time.
Thanks, Matt. And again, that's a great example of the value for Many Rivers through evaluation and partnering with Matt and the Deloitte team. So they can continue to guide us to help us understand about the questions that we should be thinking about. And then our job is essentially to try and work out how do we practically and simply implement those and then learn through that process. Look, I think our time has sort of come to an end. I really just wanted to finish with a few thank yous. Firstly, a thank you to the Many Rivers board that leads and governs us. I wanted to thank obviously the Many Rivers team for working so hard over these last 12 months and especially during this COVID period. They've done a fantastic job, they really have. I wanted to thank Matt again for his leadership in the evaluation and his team and the support that they provide us. It's a fantastic relationship. They're a fantastic organisation, a very capable organisation, so I highly recommend them. And I also wanted to thank everybody who's joined us today for your interest this year as well as in the past. And if something that we've talked about today is interesting and useful for you that you would like to follow up with, then please make sure that you connect into myself or to James. We'd love to talk to you more about Many Rivers and our thoughts and our plans. So make sure you do that. James and the business development team will send out a copy of our presentations today. That will also provide a link through to the full evaluation report on our website. So please make sure that you take the time to get yourself a cup of coffee and sit down and have a quiet read. And so I just wanted to finish again by saying thank you very much. And I'm so glad that you've been able to join us today. Thanks everyone. See you then.